The cold March wind swept through the streets of Budapest's District 8 as Esther pressed herself against the damp brick wall of the apartment building. Her fingers trembled, not entirely from the temperature. Through the thin walls, she could hear her stepfather's voice rising in desperate pitch, speaking to someone on the phone. "I need more time," Karoli pleaded, his Hungarian accent thick with panic. "Just 2 more weeks, I swear I'll have the money." Esther closed her eyes. She knew that tone. It was the same one he'd used 3 years ago when her mother died, leaving her alone with this man who saw her as nothing more than an inconvenience. The gambling had started small, a few forints here and there at the local card games. Now, at 19, she'd watched those debts grow into something monstrous. The door burst open. Karoli stood there, his face flushed with alcohol and anxiety. His shirt was stained, and his eyes held that wild look she'd come to dread. "Get inside," he commanded. She obeyed, keeping her distance as she entered the cramped 2-room apartment. The furniture was sparse now. He'd sold most of it months ago. Only a worn couch, a small table, and 2 chairs remained. The walls were yellowed from years of cigarette smoke, and the carpet was threadbare in the center. "Sit down," Karoli said, pouring himself another drink from the nearly empty bottle on the counter. "We need to talk." Esther remained standing. "About what?" "About your future," he said, downing the drink in one gulp. "About our future." She felt her stomach tighten. Nothing good ever came from conversations that started this way. Karoli turned to face her, and for a moment something almost like regret flickered across his features, but it was gone as quickly as it appeared. "I owe people money, Esther, a lot of money, more than I can pay." "That's not my problem," she said quietly, though she knew it was about to become exactly that. "It is now." He set the glass down, with more force than necessary. "Istvan, the man I owe. He's willing to forgive the debt, all of it, 30 million forints." "How?" The word came out as barely a whisper. "He needs help with his businesses. Someone young, presentable." Karoli wouldn't meet her eyes. "He's willing to take you instead of the money." The words hung in the air like poison. Esther felt the room tilt slightly, her breath catching in her throat. "You're selling me." "I'm giving you an opportunity," he corrected, though his voice lacked conviction. "Istvan is wealthy. He can provide for you better than I ever could." "He's a criminal," Esther shot back, her voice finally finding strength. "Everyone knows what he does. The drugs, the smuggling, the—" She couldn't finish the sentence. "You don't have a choice," Karoli said flatly. "He's coming tomorrow to finalize the arrangement." Esther felt tears burning behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall, not in front of him. "My mother would be ashamed of you." Something dark flashed across Karoli's face. "Your mother left me with nothing but debts and a stepdaughter I never wanted. I've kept a roof over your head for 3 years. This is how you repay me." There was no point arguing. Esther turned and walked to the small room that served as her bedroom, barely larger than a closet, with a narrow bed and a chest of drawers. She closed the door and leaned against it, finally allowing the tears to come. Through the thin wood, she heard Karoli making another phone call, confirming the meeting for tomorrow at noon. Her mind raced through possibilities. She could run, but where? She had no money, no relatives in Budapest who could help. Her mother's family was in the countryside, and she hadn't seen them since the funeral. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through her contacts. There were friends from her brief time at university, before Karoli had forced her to drop out to save money, but none of them could help with something like this. She worked part-time at a cafe in District 5, but her wages barely covered her own expenses. The night stretched endlessly. Esther lay on her bed, staring at the water-stained ceiling, planning and discarding a dozen escape routes. By the time dawn broke over the Danube, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, she still had no solution. At 11:30 the next morning, Karoli told her to dress nicely. She chose a simple blue dress, one of the few decent things she owned, and pulled her dark hair back into a neat ponytail. Her face in the mirror looked older than 19, shadows under her green eyes, speaking of a sleepless night. The knock came precisely at noon. Karoli opened the door to reveal Istvan, a man in his 50s with cold eyes and an expensive suit that seemed out of place in their shabby apartment. Behind him stood two large men who were clearly security. "Karoli," Istvan greeted, his voice smooth and dangerous. "And this must be Esther." His eyes traveled over her in a way that made her skin crawl. She forced herself to stand straight, to meet his gaze without flinching. "She's exactly as you described," Istvan continued, stepping into the apartment. "Young, pretty, and, I hope, obedient." "She'll do as she's told," Karoli said quickly. Istvan reached into his jacket and pulled out a thick envelope. "Here's the contract. Sign it and we're done. Your debts are cleared." As Karoli reached for the envelope, another knock echoed through the apartment. Everyone froze. Istvan's security team immediately moved to defensive positions. "Were you expecting someone else?" Istvan asked coldly. Karoli shook his head, his face pale. "No one." The knock came again, more insistent this time. One of Istvan's men opened the door cautiously. A man stood in the hallway, tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in an immaculate charcoal suit that made Istvan's look cheap by comparison. He appeared to be in his early 30s, with dark hair and striking blue eyes that took in the scene with sharp intelligence. "Good afternoon," he said in perfect Hungarian, though something in his accent suggested he'd spent time abroad. "I'm looking for Karoli Kovacs. I believe we have business to discuss." Istvan stepped forward aggressively. "This apartment is currently occupied with private business. Leave." The stranger's eyes moved from Istvan to Esther, and something shifted in his expression. Recognition, perhaps, or calculation. "I understand you have a financial arrangement being negotiated. I'd like to make a counter-offer." "The deal is done," Istvan growled. "Not until the contract is signed," the stranger observed, nodding toward the envelope still in Karoli's hands. He pulled out his own phone and tapped the screen a few times. "I'm prepared to offer 60 million forints. Double your debt. Cash transfer. Immediate." The room fell silent. Esther's heart pounded so hard she thought everyone must be able to hear it. Who was this man? What did he want? Karoli's eyes widened with greed. 60 million? "On one condition," the stranger continued, his gaze moving back to Esther. "The young lady comes with me willingly, and I'm offering her employment, not ownership. She'll work in my company with a proper salary and contract." Istvan's face had turned dark red. "You're making a serious mistake interrupting my business." The stranger finally looked directly at Istvan, and when he spoke, his voice carried absolute authority. "I'm Marcel Nagy. Perhaps you've heard of me." Even Esther recognized the name. Nagy Industries, one of the largest tech companies in Central Europe, with offices in Budapest, Vienna, and Berlin. This man wasn't just wealthy. He was powerful in ways that made Istvan's criminal empire look small. Istvan's aggressive posture faltered slightly. "This is still my deal." "Was your deal," Marcel corrected. "Karoli, what's your answer? 30 million and your stepdaughter's freedom, or 60 million and her employment?" Karoli didn't hesitate. 60. "You bastard!" Istvan spat, but he was already backing toward the door. Even he wasn't foolish enough to challenge someone like Marcel Nagy in broad daylight. Marcel's phone chimed. "Transfer complete, check your account." Karoli frantically pulled out his phone, his hands shaking. His eyes went wide. "It's there. All of it." "Then we're done here," Marcel said. He looked at Esther. "Get whatever you need. We're leaving." Esther stood frozen, torn between terror and hope. She didn't know this man, didn't understand why he'd just paid double to take her away from Istvan. But she knew staying in this apartment meant waiting for Istvan's revenge. She grabbed her jacket and the small backpack she'd prepared the night before. Everything she owned that mattered fit inside. As she walked toward the door, she looked back at Carolee one last time. He wouldn't meet her eyes. "Goodbye," she said quietly, though she wasn't sure if she meant it as a farewell or good riddance. Marcel held the door open for her, and they walked out together. A sleek black Mercedes waited at the curb, driven by a professional-looking man in a suit. As they drove away from District 8, away from the only life she'd known, Esther finally found her voice. "Why?" Marcel was quiet for a moment, looking out the window at the city passing by, the grand buildings of Andrassy Avenue, the green expanse of Heroes Square in the distance. "Because no one should be sold like property," he finally said, "and because I meant what I said. You'll work for your freedom, but you will be free." Esther wanted to believe him, but she'd learned the hard way that men with power always wanted something in return. The question was, what did Marcel Nagy really want from her? As they crossed the Danube, leaving Pest behind for the hills of Buda, Esther realized her old life was truly over. Whether this new one would be better or worse remained to be seen. The Mercedes climbed through the winding streets of the Buda Hills, leaving behind the dense urban landscape of Pest. Esther watched through the window as communist-era apartment blocks gave way to elegant villas with manicured gardens. The higher they climbed, the more Budapest revealed itself, the Parliament building golden in the afternoon sun, the chain bridge spanning the Danube like a necklace of stone and iron. They finally stopped before a modern three-story house with clean lines and large windows overlooking the city. It was beautiful in an understated way, all glass and white stone, surrounded by carefully maintained gardens, still waiting for spring to fully arrive. "This is my home," Marcel said simply, opening the car door. "And temporarily yours." Esther followed him up the stone steps, her backpack feeling ridiculously small against the grandeur of the entrance. The driver, whose name she learned was Andras, nodded politely before driving the car to what she assumed was a garage somewhere on the property. Inside, the house was exactly what she'd expected. Minimalist furniture, expensive art on the walls, everything in its place. But there was also an unexpected warmth, books scattered on a side table, a half-finished cup of coffee on the kitchen counter, a jacket thrown over a chair. Someone actually lived here. It wasn't just a showpiece. "You must have questions," Marcel said, gesturing for her to sit on a comfortable grey couch. "I'll try to answer them." Esther sat carefully, still clutching her backpack. "Why did you do it? The money, the everything. You don't know me." "No, I don't," Marcel agreed, sitting across from her in a leather armchair. "But I knew your mother." The words hit her like a physical blow. "What?" "Anna worked for my company about 5 years ago in the accounting department. She was brilliant, one of the best financial analysts I've ever employed." Marcel's expression softened. "When she got sick, we tried to help, but she refused. Pride, maybe, or not wanting to be a burden. After she died, I learned about the situation she'd left you in. I've been keeping distant watch, I suppose." Esther felt tears threatening again. "She never mentioned you. She wouldn't have. Anna was intensely private about her personal life." Marcel stood and walked to the large windows overlooking the city. "Yesterday, one of my security team informed me that Carolee was planning to sell you to Istvan Molnar. I couldn't let that happen." "So this is charity," Esther said, hating how bitter her voice sounded. "You feel sorry for me?" "No." Marcel turned to face her. "This is obligation. Your mother helped build my company's financial infrastructure. She deserved better than dying and leaving her daughter to a man like Carolee. I'm evening a debt. By paying 60 million forints." A slight smile crossed Marcel's face. "I've spent more on less important things. And I meant what I said. You'll work for it. I have a position available in my communications department. You studied literature at Eladta before you had to leave, correct?" Esther nodded slowly, wondering how much he actually knew about her life. "We need someone to handle English and German correspondence, translate documents, manage international communications. The pay is competitive, 400,000 forints per month to start, with benefits. You'll live here for now in the guest quarters until you're established enough to find your own place. No rent, no obligations beyond the work itself." It sounded too good to be true. "And if I want to leave, then you leave," Marcel said simply. "I'm not your stepfather, Esther. I'm not Istvan Molnar. You're free to walk out that door any time you choose." She studied his face, looking for deception, for hidden motives. But all she saw was tired honesty. "Why do you look so sad when you talk about my mother?" Marcel was quiet for a long moment. "Because I failed to help her when she needed it most. I was too focused on business, too willing to accept her refusals. If I'd pushed harder, maybe she would have gotten better treatment, maybe." He stopped himself. "There's no point in maybe, but I can help you now." Andras appeared in the doorway. "Sir, your 3 o'clock meeting is in 30 minutes. "Thank you." Marcel looked back at Esther. "I need to go to the office. Andras will show you to your room and explain the house systems. Take today to rest, to process. Tomorrow, if you choose to accept the position, we'll go to the office and begin the paperwork. Is that acceptable?" Esther found herself nodding. What else could she do? Return to Karoli's apartment? Run away to nothing? At least here, she had a chance to rebuild something. "One more thing," Marcel said from the doorway. "Istvan Molnar won't take today's incident well. I've arranged for security. Andras and his team will be nearby at all times. You're safe here, but be cautious if you go out. Understood?" The reminder sent a chill through her. She'd been so focused on escaping that she hadn't fully considered Istvan's revenge. After Marcel left, Andras gave her a tour of the house. Her room was on the 2nd floor, larger than Karoli's entire apartment, with an ensuite bathroom, a small balcony, and furniture that looked like it cost more than she'd earned in her entire life. Someone had already stocked the closet with basic clothes in her size, and the bathroom had new toiletries still in their packaging. "Mr. Nagy asked me to arrange these," Andras explained, noticing her surprised expression. "If anything doesn't fit or isn't to your taste, just let me know. We can exchange them." "This is, too much," Esther whispered. Andras smiled kindly. He was probably in his 40s, with greying hair and a gentle demeanor that contrasted with his obvious physical capability. "Mr. Nagy doesn't do things halfway. He's been worried about your situation for some time. He's glad to finally be able to help." After Andras left, Esther stood on the balcony, looking out at Budapest spreading below her. The Danube wound through the city like a silver ribbon, and in the distance she could see the green expanse of Margaret Island. Somewhere out there was her old life. The cramped apartment, the cafe where she worked, the university she'd had to abandon. She thought about her mother, working in Marcel's office 5 years ago. Had she been happy there? Had she liked this man, who now claimed to be repaying a debt? Anna had never mentioned her work much, preferring to focus on Esther's studies, on their small life together. That night, unable to sleep in the unfamiliar luxury, Esther explored the house. She found Marcel's study on the 1st floor, walls lined with books in multiple languages, a large desk covered with papers and technical diagrams. On one shelf she found a photo, Marcel, perhaps 5 years younger, standing with a group of employees. And there, in the front row, was her mother, smiling, confident, alive. "She insisted on being in that photo," a voice said from behind her. Esther spun around to find Marcel in the doorway, still in his work clothes but looking exhausted. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have—" "It's fine," he interrupted. "I work late. I should have warned you I'd be wandering around." He walked over and picked up the photo. This was taken at our 5-year anniversary celebration. Anna had just finished restructuring our entire accounting system, saved the company millions. She was brilliant. "She never talked about it," Esther said quietly. "She wouldn't. She was always more concerned about you, your education, your future." Marcel set the photo back carefully. "She talked about you constantly. How proud she was that you'd gotten into Eladta, how you wanted to be a writer or translator someday." Tears finally spilled down Esther's cheeks. "And then she got sick, and everything fell apart." "Not everything," Marcel said gently. "You're still here. You're still strong. You survived 3 years with Carolee, and now you have a chance to rebuild. Your mother would be proud of that." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment before Marcel spoke again. "I should let you sleep. Tomorrow will be a long day if you decide to take the position." "I'll take it," Esther said, "and thank you for everything." Marcel nodded. "Your mother deserved someone to look after her daughter. I'm just sorry it took so long." As Esther returned to her room, she felt something she hadn't experienced in 3 years. Hope. Maybe this strange arrangement could actually work. Maybe she could finally start living again instead of just surviving. She didn't know then how complicated things would become, or how much danger still lurked in the shadows. For tonight, in this beautiful room overlooking Budapest, she allowed herself to believe in the possibility of something better. Outside, the city lights glittered like promises, and somewhere in the darkness, Istvan Molnar was planning his revenge. The next morning, Esther woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows, and for a disorienting moment forgot where she was. Then it all came rushing back. Carolee's betrayal, Istvan's cold eyes, Marcel's unexpected intervention. She sat up slowly, taking in the elegant room that was now temporarily hers. A soft knock at the door was followed by Andras's voice. "Miss Kovacs, breakfast is ready when you are. Mr. Nagy would like to leave for the office at 9. Esther glanced at the clock, 7:30. She'd slept better than she had in months, despite everything. "Thank you. I'll be down soon." In the bathroom, she stared at her reflection. Dark circles still shadowed her eyes, but there was something different, a spark of determination that had been missing. She showered quickly, dressed in one of the new outfits from the closet, dark slacks and a simple cream blouse that fit perfectly, and went downstairs. Marcel was already at the breakfast table, reading something on his tablet while drinking coffee. He looked up when she entered. "Good morning. I hope you slept well." "Better than expected," Esther admitted, sitting across from him. The table was set with fresh bread, cheese, fruit and eggs, more food than she was used to seeing at once. "Eat," Marcel encouraged. "We'll discuss your position on the way to the office." The drive took them back down from the hills into the city centre. Nagy Industries occupied a modern glass building near Diak Ferenc Square, 10 stories of gleaming architecture that stood out among the older structures around it. Inside, the office buzzed with activity. Employees nodded respectfully to Marcel as they passed, some glancing curiously at Esther. He led her to the 8th floor, where the communications department occupied an open space filled with desks, computers, and people speaking multiple languages. A woman in her 40s with short blonde hair and sharp eyes approached them. "Marcel, good morning. Is this our new translator?" "Esther Kovacs. This is Vera Takac, head of communications," Marcel introduced them. "Vera, Esther will be handling English and German correspondence. She comes highly recommended." Vera shook Esther's hand with a firm grip, studying her with an assessing gaze. "Welcome. Can you start today?" Yes," Esther said, surprised. "Good. We're buried in contracts from our Berlin office that need translation. Vera looked at Marcel. I'll take it from here. You have that meeting with the investors in 20 minutes. Marcel nodded and turned to Esther. You're in excellent hands. Vera runs this department better than I run the company. I'll check in later. As he walked away, Vera led Esther to an empty desk near a window overlooking the bustling square below. Marcel told me a bit about your situation, she said quietly. You don't need to worry. No one here knows the details, and they won't unless you choose to share. As far as everyone's concerned, you're simply a new hire with strong language skills. Thank you, Esther said, grateful for the discretion. Now, let's see what you can do. Vera pulled up several documents on the computer. These are partnership contracts from our Berlin office. We need Hungarian translations by tomorrow morning. Think you can handle it? Esther scanned the first document. The German was technical, full of legal and business terminology, but she'd studied this kind of language at university. Yes, I can do this. Good. If you have questions, ask Tamas. He's at the desk behind you, handles French and Italian. Vera smiled slightly. Welcome to Nagy Industries, Esther. We work hard here, but it's worth it. The day passed in a blur of concentration. Esther lost herself in the work, translating technical specifications, contract clauses, and business correspondence. It was challenging but satisfying, using her mind in ways she hadn't since leaving university. Tamas proved helpful, a friendly man in his 30s who offered coffee and advice on company-specific terminology. At lunch, several colleagues invited her to join them at a nearby cafe. They were curious but polite, asking about her background, her language skills, her education. She kept her answers vague, focusing on her university studies rather than the 3 years that followed. By 5 o'clock, when most employees started leaving, Esther had finished 2 contracts and was deep into a third. Vera stopped by her desk. Impressive work. Most new hires don't produce this much on their first day. She glanced at the screen. But it's past 5. Go home. Rest. Tomorrow will be just as busy. I'd like to finish this one, Esther said, if that's all right. Vera studied her for a moment. Don't burn yourself out trying to prove something. You're already hired. You don't need to work yourself to exhaustion. But Esther couldn't explain that work was a relief, a way to silence the anxious thoughts about Istvan, about Karoli, about whether this new life could possibly last. Just another hour, she promised. At 6:30, as the office emptied, Marcel appeared at her desk. Andras told me you were still here, ready to go home. Esther saved her work and stood, surprised by how stiff her back had become. How did your meeting go? Well enough. The investors are cautiously optimistic about our expansion into renewable energy tech. They walked to the elevator together. Vera says you did excellent work today. It felt good, Esther admitted, using my brain again, doing something meaningful. In the car, Marcel was quiet for a while before speaking. I received a message this afternoon. Istvan Molnar is displeased about yesterday's events. He's making threats. Fear clenched Esther's stomach. What kind of threats? The typical kind. Pride was wounded, money was lost, reputation damaged. Marcel's voice was calm but serious. I've increased security around the house and the office. Andras and his team are experienced, but I want you to be careful. Don't go anywhere alone, especially not back to District 8. I wasn't planning to, Esther said quietly. There's nothing there for me anymore. What about your things? Clothes? Personal items? Everything I care about was in my backpack. She looked out the window at the city passing by. The rest is just stuff, things my mother bought, things that remind me of better times. But I'd rather leave them than risk running into Karoli or Istvan. Marcel nodded. Understandable. If you change your mind, we can arrange for Andras to retrieve anything specific. That evening, back at the house, Esther found herself restless. She'd been so busy all day that she hadn't had time to process everything that had happened. Now, in the quiet of the evening, reality settled over her like a weight. She wandered to the study and found Marcel there, working at his desk. He looked up when she entered. "Can't sleep. Can't stop thinking," Esther admitted. "Yesterday morning, I thought my life was over. Today I have a job, a place to stay, and a future that doesn't terrify me. It doesn't feel real." "It's real," Marcel assured her. "And you earned it. The work you did today, that wasn't charity, that was skill and effort." "Why are you really doing this?" Esther asked. "The truth. Is it just guilt about my mother?" Marcel was quiet for a long moment. "Partly, but also because I understand what it's like to be trapped by someone else's choices. My father built this company, but he also made decisions that left me cleaning up messes for years. I know what it's like to feel like your life isn't your own." "Did you escape?" "Eventually. It took time, and help from people who believed in me when they had no reason to." He met her eyes. "I'm paying that forward. Your mother believed in me when I was still trying to prove I could run this company. Now I believe in you." Esther felt tears threatening again. She'd cried more in the past 2 days than in the previous 3 years combined. "I don't want to disappoint you." "You won't," Marcel said with quiet certainty. "You survived 3 years with a man who didn't value you, maintained your dignity, and kept hold of your dreams. That's not someone who disappoints easily." She smiled slightly. "My mother talked about me that much?" "Constantly. It was actually annoying sometimes," Marcel said with a rare grin. "But she was right about everything. You're exactly as remarkable as she claimed." As Esther returned to her room, she felt something she hadn't experienced in years: belief in herself. Maybe she could do this. Maybe she could build something new from the ruins of her old life. She didn't know that across the city, in a dim office in District 8, Istvan Molnar was making plans. He'd been humiliated, and men like Istvan didn't forgive humiliation. He couldn't touch Marcel Nagy directly. That would be suicide, but the girl was a different matter. And he had patience. He could wait for the right opportunity. In her comfortable room overlooking Budapest, Esther slept peacefully, unaware of the danger still hunting her. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, and the slow understanding that her connection to Marcel was becoming something more complicated than simple gratitude. But tonight, she simply rested, gathering strength for whatever came next.